Good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible to everyone here in this room? Yeah. My name is Kruti Garg. I've been working with Abha for the last 17 years and been an active a conservation architect myself. Today, I'm just going to take you up through the journey of how Mumbai got inscribed on the World Heritage List, a city that we all love, we all are proud of, and something which probably was always a miss when it came to heritage. Normally in our country, a lot of the heritage is put under a bracket of what we consider ancient, monumental, temples, religious sites, cave sites, etc., which it is. But what this paper and what this journey also talks about is how when we are into 20, 30 years of working in conservation in the country, how modern heritage becomes essentially important, and a dialogue which is very, very relevant in today's time, that yes, we have our India is a land of vast culture, vast history, ancient history, but we also need to embrace 19th and 20th century architecture, which our city sort of exemplifies in its form. So what we have here is, I'm going to take you through this journey in two ways. One, a little about, talk about what is the site that we are discussing and what is Mumbai's World Heritage. And two is how we got about, and it took 15 years for us to be able to put this area on the map of World Heritage. This is just a little timeline of how it all began in 2003 when Abha presented a paper at a conference on modern heritage in Chandigarh. There were only two sites and two presentations. So while there was discussion on Sydney Opera House, there was talk about the Shanghai Bund, you talk about the Indonesia's Bandung area. Two papers which spoke about Indian context were on Le Corbusier's buildings in Chandigarh, and Abha presented her paper on modern heritage, which is the Art Deco buildings fronting the Marine Drive in Bombay. Back then in 2003, it was still Bombay, and in 2004, it went on to change its name to Mumbai. After that, so there's a certain process that UNESCO lists when it comes to inscribing sites and buildings or structures or cultural heritage as part of the World Heritage. So they start with making a tentative nomination. So what you have to do is that you have to prepare a list which is approved by the government, and then it goes and it's submitted to the World Heritage Organization, which is in UNESCO heads in Paris. And after that, once it's accepted by their advisory committee, then it goes on to becoming the submission or a nomination by the central government, which is there's a central advisory committee at the center, at the country level, where they submit it officially as their entry for subscription or inscription to World Heritage. Then it takes another year. You have a mission, an ICOMOS mission, which comes, it sees the site, it understands. So whatever you have written or whatever you have presented, they come and see the on-ground reality. They take care of, they look at the management aspects of the site. They look at how and what you're doing to keep this heritage in check, and then go on to inscribing it in a convention, which in our case happened in 2018. So all the way from 2003, when we started a dialogue, it took around these 15 years, and 2018 in July, which we just celebrated the anniversary just a couple of days back, is when Mumbai got nominated. These were just some validatory letters which were produced, signed by the Chief Minister, then Chief Minister of Maharashtra, also Shri Amitabh Bachchan, reinforcing the need to inscribe our city as a World Heritage Site. So what it does, what we're going to see now is what is the site actually that we're talking about. So there are two aspects. It's called the Victorian and the Art Deco Ensemble of Mumbai. So the Victorian architecture is what we all know as, if you're driving past Oval Maidan or Azad Maidan, so Victoria Terminus, the Bombay Municipal Corporation, the High Court building, the University of Mumbai, and the buildings along that line form the Victorian edge of the ensemble. And across the other side of the open spaces, which is towards the seaside or the seafront, is the Art Deco stretch. And we all know that Mumbai is the second largest city in the world to have a concentration of Art Deco buildings after Miami's Ocean Drive. So, and in Asia, it's the only city which has such a large concentration of Art Deco buildings, and it almost forms an urban language and speaks about a shift of time and dynamics in the early 20th century. The people, and very importantly, any project and any, whether it's an on-ground project or whether it's preparing a dossier such as this, always comes together with the right people at the right time, with the right team. And in this case, these were the institutes, the individuals, along with the government, who've been instrumental in having taken this journey together to inscribe this site as heritage. We have the government of Maharashtra, completely indebted, the UDRI, which is an NGO, the MMR-HCS body, the Oval Residents Association, and the list, and our office. So this is what we had submitted. This is just a series of maps which show you, so what in your World Heritage language, there's something called the core site, which is, or the property, which is what you see in the red line, which is the main site that you're talking about. So the main key structures which belong to the Victorian the Victorian style, and the red line which you see along the face is what Marine Drive is. And the blue line is the buffer, as we call it, which is the area surrounding the main core site, which also needs to be in, sort of in a larger management framework, which aids to the conservation and, to the entire vision of the heritage property. So this is how it was in detail. I mean, the little bit of revision that we had done. And this is what it forms today. So there are 94 buildings in the property, and for orientation, that's the Marine Drive. So you see that stretch. You have the stadium. You go along the stretch with the Art Deco buildings on the western edge of Oval Maidan. You have the Church Gate Station, the old Western Railway headquarters. And along the front of what was the Esplanade, you have the High Court, the PWD buildings, University, the City Sessions Court today. Earlier it was the old Secretariat. The NGMA buildings, the museum, which is the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, along with the DG Maharashtra State Police Headquarters, which was earlier the Sailors' Home, and the Circle, the Regal Cinema, which is also an Art Deco building. And this is what is inscribed as part of World Heritage. The compelling reasons are therefore then established by way of making a nomination dossier. So after presenting that, yes, this is the case, there's a certain way we have to go about it. So there is a certain process that has to be followed. And the World Heritage Committee or the convention establishes that by a series of guidelines, which are, by which you have to adhere to certain criteria for selecting your site within those 6 criterias. And if they fall within those 6 criterias, either any one of them or a couple of them or more, and justify that this is how your site is important and it meets those criteria, they take the case forward. And in our case, so this is the Victorian edge, the stretch that you can see, and the Art Deco buildings. So these are just some, this is just a historical lineup, because one of the criteria that we presented this case was its criteria 2, which basically says it's an exchange of human values and, adding to cultural exchanges between either internationally or nationally, and how it aids to the architectural language. And in this case, both these stretches that we're talking about independently have heralded a movement in the city. And so when we talk about the Victorian edge, which is this one, So this comes around at a time, so Bombay being a fort town in 1860s, we have the governor breaking down the fort walls and then opening up the city to the sea, creating that entire esplanade which is now broken up into four open spaces. You have the cooperage, you have Oval Maidan, Cross Maidan and Azad Maidan, which comprised of the esplanade after the demolition of the fort walls. And then there was the need to establish a new language for the city of Bombay, then by the then governor, Bartle Frere. And what he did was that, so there was Calcutta, and you had a huge classical language which was being used as a medium of expression for architectural buildings. And he wanted to break away from that language. And therefore, the Victorian Gothic style, which sort of imbibes from the 14th or 15th century Gothic buildings in Europe, and merging it with the Victorian style, also along with indigenous elements which are very strongly, which come from our local, because you have, the masons were local, the craft people were working from here. The material was local, so we have 3 or 4 types of stone which we were building in. There was the profuse need to establish an architectural front which would be robust, which would be speaking of a shift and saying that, okay, this is what power means and this is where the city is going to do its job. And that's when you have this language coming up. So you have the buildings become, so even if you see the town hall building, if you remember how it looks, it's more, it's a white building, you have colonnaded pediment, it's very classical in its design approach, to what we see here, which is an amalgamation of the buff stone, which is Malad stone, the Porbandar, which is the limestone, and how it accentuates its Gothic details. This exact phenomenon then happens, so this is 1870s to the 1900s, and then the same shift happens at a time, but then on a larger international level, and Bombay becomes the base for using this expression in this side, in our country. So what happened in 1890s or 1880s to the Victorian edge now comes with the Back Bay Reclamation, as we call it, where there was lands reclaimed from the sea, as good as about 550 acres of land which was reclaimed from the sea, to be able to create a language in sync with the international styles. So we have the exposition in Paris, which leads to the establishment of Art Deco, and it's a move in lifestyle. So you're talking about newer materials, you're talking about newer construction, you're talking about the Industrial Revolution giving rise to use of steel, concrete, everything which was not there at the time when the Victorian Gothic buildings were being constructed. And with that came a different in the way they're expressed architecturally. So with that came a certain system of height restrictions. All the windows are at one level. There are these sills, there are these bands which accentuate. There are these corner plots which are being treated differently. And at the same time, you have the Egyptian Tutankhamun's tomb getting found, and those expressions start coming on into the architectural language. You have them in jewelry, you have them in furniture, you have them in cars, you have them in automobiles, and everything, and in architecture. And that's what Bombay's Art Deco did on the map of the world. It took that movement, it established itself, it contextualized it to the local form. It juxtaposed itself with an already existing edifice of the Victorian Gothic stretch, and without taking away from it. So when the fort walls were demolished, okay, you've broken something, you've done something new. What this is doing, it's celebrating what was there and adding an element, adding a layer to it. So, I mean, almost re-representing Bombay as being the gateway of India. So these were the compelling reasons which were put forth in the dossier, which is a documentary report which has to be prepared by the state, by the people, and submitted to the authorities. Some examples of what I've just spoken in terms of visual language, and what you can see together, both the edges. So this is where you are. And this is the stretch that we talk about. So while you also have, within the way we move forward, you need to make comparisons and to say that, okay, there's something happening abroad, how do you justify its important to this country? So these are a series of examples that you talk about: Gothic architecture in Melbourne, you talk about Durban, Shanghai, the US. And these are the two criteria that I was discussing, under which the cities, Victorian and Art Deco, have been inscribed. So it talks about interchange of human values, vibrant cosmopolitanism, it talks about architectural development. And then what you do is create a statement of outstanding universal value, which is clubbed with a statement of integrity and authenticity, establishing the same details that I just gave, and also talks about protection and management. What helped the case in our city when it comes to protection is that in '95, Bombay was one of the first cities in the country which sort of created a system of heritage listing, where the first step to be able to save your heritage is to be able to acknowledge it, to be aware about it, and then to follow a process by way of listing it within BMC in this case. And you prepare a list, and then there's a committee called the Heritage Conservation Committee, which gets formulated to take care of how these structures are therefore being safeguarded. So with that protection and management in place, it helped the case for the Kamas mission when they came to be able to see that, yes, it's a great example of how these two architectural languages and systems work together and juxtapose together, and how well they are being managed, in spite of some of them being owned by the government, some of them being owned by privately as residential apartments. In spite of having different uses and different forms and different functions, they still work together and they're still protected. So that's how, because it's also the Marine Drive, which was proposed as if it was a precinct. Yeah. Just to run you through this quickly. So these were all the series of detailed documentation work that was done by the office, which went into the domination dossier. Apart from that, what happens, just keeping it here. Apart from that, so like I said, so with Abha being the forefront of driving this thing, we did have to go through a couple of hurdles along the way. 15 years, it was not just, okay, one fine day, the report was ready, and then it went on. So there were, while the government is supportive in a lot of ways, it does need a lot of convincing. We do need to go door to door, and take baby steps to find our way through, having them come on board with our own vision and see it through. So while the document was prepared in 2014, it was on the list in 2011. The only nodal agency which can submit your document to the World Heritage Convention is the center, which is through ASI. And they have a central advisory body. And that committee completely kept rejecting the need for Bombay. They didn't think it was worthy enough to be World Heritage. So a lot of times, we would go for meetings, we would come back dejected, saying that, okay, this is not okay, we're not going to send this document ahead. And most interesting part about this entire exercise was that it was not just one individual, it was a series of residents' associations which got together to make this happen. So while UDRI became the office where meetings would happen, Okra, which is Oval Maidan Residents Association, or Kala Ghoda, they became, we raised funds from the MMRDA, so their Heritage Conservation Society gave us some money to fund the air tickets to go to Delhi, to make presentations, for the printing of the books that we had to do. All of that. And finally, with after 3 years, so 2014 to 2017, so 3 years, we kept going back and forth and back and forth. So the one year, they said that, okay, now Delhi is what we will send ahead. And the next year, you have Nalanda, which is going ahead for World Heritage inscription. and so on and so forth. And finally, with the help of China NC, Abha got a meeting with the Minister of Culture at that time, went to Delhi, convinced him about why this is so important. And he sort of then gave the mandate. And in February 2017, Mumbai was the official submission to the World Heritage Convention. You have the ICOMOS mission, your Japanese expert who would come to inspect the site, and he was being taken around, and not with the government officials. Normally, when you have an international, officer or an expert who comes in, you have a government, like people from the government taking him around and all of that, and that was completely done by the citizens, completely. And finally, when they all met in the office of the then Principal Secretary, Urban Development, Nitin Karir, and Prithviraj Chauhan, then he was the one who commented that this is the first time that I've been shown around the proposed site by citizens and not by government officials. And to that, Mr. Karir said that this is the first time that this nomination has been prepared by the citizens and not by the government. And that is the story of how Mumbai finds itself on the world map today. Thank you.